Thank you for participating to Italian Americans in Ohio Oral History Project. Can you please tell us your name?
Linda Settevendemie Kelly.
Great. When and where are you born?
I was born in Cleveland, Ohio.
Great. And where did you grow up?
The first half of my life we lived right in Cleveland, pretty close to downtown Cleveland. And then when I was 6 years old, we moved to East Cleveland. And I was there till I was 11, 12, 13, 13 maybe, 7th grade. And then we moved out to the suburbs. And our family, we were all together. When I lived in Cleveland, my grandparents owned an apartment, a 4-suite apartment. And they lived in one, and they had 4 sons, and the boys all lived in each one of the apartments. My dad got married and bought the house next door, and it was actually a duplex with a thing upstairs. So we lived next door. Grandma, Grandpa, Uncle Mel, Uncle Lottie all lived next door. And then pretty soon, when we moved to East Cleveland, my grandma and grandpa bought another house. It was a duplex, and Uncle Larry and Uncle Mel lived in those 2 apartments. And Grandma bought another apartment, and we lived upstairs, she lived downstairs. So the 4 brothers, again, we were all together. My grandfather had passed away at that time. And then the boys, all the brothers owned auto parts stores. There were 2 brothers in one store and 2 brothers in the other store. And eventually we left the city and moved out to the suburbs, and we all lived on the same street. All 4 brothers, 3 on one street, and 1 brother lived on the street behind us. So that's how we grew up.
Just to stay very close.
Very close, very close. I always say I had 4 mothers and 4 fathers and 4 mothers. And another time when I was all grown up, I was married and I lived on the west side of town, but I was teaching on the east side of town, and I came over east and I didn't have any money. I came with no money in my wallet. I don't know why I didn't have money. And Uncle Mel, who is Annie and Susie's father, just couldn't believe I came with no money and opened up his wallet and gave me $20 because that's just what they did. I mean, they just all took care of us. So, yeah. So, and then I grew up mostly there, I would say from 12, and I did get married till I was 30, so I consider Lyndhurst my home.
So feel a sense of protection maybe.
Such a sense of protection. It was amazing. And then all of the uncles all died first, and then the aunts stayed there. My mom and my aunt continued to live there. Well, my mother died in that house. She was 100 years old, and my Aunt Betty was the last one to go, and she left maybe 7 years before my mother died. But until that time, they pretty much were taking care of each other.
Great.
You know.
Very interesting. So what do you know about your family name?
My family name?
Yes, Settevendemie.
Well, is it okay to say the same thing that Annie and Susie said because you already talked to them?
I mean, these are the questions, so
okay.
you may have a different take on the story.
So our name is Settevendemie. My understanding is that in Italy, the Vendami is a season toward the fall when they pick the grapes. So it literally means 7 grapes or 7 Vendamis or the 7th picking of the grapes. I'm not sure. So somehow our families had to be involved with vineyards and winemakers is what we think.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know if the name has undergone any changes coming to the U.S.?
Yes. When they came from Italy to America and went through Ellis Island, our name is Settevendemie, and it used to be Mmie.
Yeah.
And someone on Ellis Island just whacked off an M and compressed it for us.
Okay, yeah. Great.
Which isn't too bad because some people get turned into Smiths. So I'm thinking whatever they did wasn't too bad.
That's very true. That's very true. Some people, sometimes, the officials at Ellis Island said, this name is impossible to pronounce. So I'll change it
all of our lives. I was a kindergarten teacher, and when those parents and the kids would see my name, it was terrible. And so I was always Miss Setti the whole time I was teaching. But before I would let them call me that, I made them say my name. So when they learned how to say my name, then those little 5-year-olds could then call me Miss Setti. So.
Okay, great. And do you know any stories about your family before they came to the United States?
Well, now that's my Settevendemie family, and then my mother was also Italian. Her name is Valenti, so I know something about the Valentis too. I know something about both sides of the story, and the one is that my grandpa Valenti and Grandma were married in Italy, had a child. Grandpa came to America to make his living and never called Grandma for a long time. He was over here doing his own thing. And my grandma got up enough money, hopped on a boat, and came to America to find him. And he was also in Cleveland. I really don't know what that grandpa did or what was happening. And our other grandma, the Settevendemie side, Grandma's maiden name was Pizzaferrara. And she had a twin sister who was engaged to our grandpa, and that twin sister was killed in a gunfight in the middle of the village, and Grandma was the next in line, so she married our grandpa, and that's how it happened. And then they came to America. I think Uncle Frank was born in Italy, and Grandma, I know, had more boys that passed away, and whether they were born in Italy first or born here, I don't know. But for sure, my Uncle Frank was born in Italy and came to America.
I see. So do you know for example, what kind of job your grandparents did when they were in Italy?
The Grandpa Settevendemie, when he came here, they lived in Mingo Junction and Steubenville, which is where Dean Martin is from, and Wellsville, Ohio, so kind of in that area, and came to Cleveland. And my grandpa was an upholsterer for the railroad, and I guess the railroads were hiring a lot of Italian people back then. And so I know that that's what that grandpa did. And my other grandpa, Angelo, I'm not sure what he did, but I know my grandma, Valenti, was a seamstress, and she worked in those horrible factories, for hours and hours. And
sweatshops.
Sweatshops. I couldn't think of the word. That's what it was. She worked in a sweatshop. And then my grandpa died when my mother was very young. He got cut by a rusty nail, and he got lockjaw. And in those days, there was nothing to cure that. And so he died from lockjaw. And my grandma had to start taking boarders into their house. And that was how she continued to take care, because there were 5 children. And she started taking boarders in, and that's how she supported them.
I see. And do you know why they moved to Ohio?
I'm thinking the railroad. I don't know if Grandpa worked, if he was working with the railroad, or if he worked in the mines or something, and maybe the railroad was a better job. I honestly don't know, but that would be my assumption, that working for the railroad was a very good job with good retirement. I know that. So.
Well, I was thinking that maybe, there were other people from the same, city back in Italy that you told them that there were jobs. Or something.
I do know they came from a town called Pradella something. Paligna. And here in Cleveland, now I was a kid, and we used to call it the Panalana Club, but now that I'm an adult, I'm thinking it was a Pradella Club, and there were a ton of people there. So maybe my grandparents came here to be with these other people from Pradella. And I know that when they were living down in Pennsylvania, there was some persecution of Italians in that area. So maybe they felt coming to a big city, there would be less persecution and,
Yeah, probably, word of mouth, because people from the same village or the same small town typically, move to the same city and they heard that there were other people from the same place, so they, great. And have you ever been to Italy?
No. I spent 3 months in Italy, England, Ireland, Scotland, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, but I was with 2 girls who had been there before and they didn't want to go back to Italy, so we passed it up.
Okay.
But I'm going. It's on my bucket list.
Okay. Do you still have family in Italy, some relatives in Italy?
Well, I don't know for sure. One of our cousins started to do the genealogy thing, and she found some Settevendemies, and I am Facebook friends with Settevendemies. One is still in Italy, that's Viola, and the other one lives in London, and her name is Sylvia. And we communicate, but we have not determined if we're relatives or not. But she's a Settevendemie, so that's
great.
all that I know. Yeah.
Should be great when you come to Italy to go visit them, just in case.
Right, and we keep trying. And the one in London too. She seems to be very well educated and has some big job and travels. So she may come to the United States someday. That would be Sylvia.
That's great. And do you have traditions or costumes that you made an effort to preserve? I mean, Italian traditions and costumes?
Not costumes, but I do a lot of traditions. Is that, like until our grandma died, so there were grandma and grandpa, they had 4 boys, and all the boys got married, and one was Italian, and my mother was Italian, and 2 sister-in-laws were not Italian. And this one family, they were really part of the family, but not really, but these 3 sisters-in-law, and none of them had a mother here to teach them or to be with them. Annie and Susie had their grandma lived in Iowa, so she was away. So our one grandma taught those 3 daughters-in-law, and those 3 daughters-in-law taught all of the cousins. So our customs are pretty much the same. But my mother, if you leave the other sister-in-law, she was the only Italian grandma or daughter-in-law, and she had no mother at all. So she cleaved to my grandma cleaved to her because they could speak Italian together, and she spent a lot of time, and the other 2 were Americanas, so the Americanas were not coming over all the time to pulling the skin off the eel and doing all the stuff that my mother was doing. And the fact that my mother actually lived upstairs from my grandma for all those years, my mother was scrubbing grandma's floor because that was the boys' duty to take care of their mother, and then that fell to the daughters to take care of their mother-in-law, So my mother spent a lot of time speaking Italian and being with her. So we did every single Christmas Eve all the fish. And my job was to hold the eel while Grandma took the pliers and pulled the skin off, or to get the bacala down in the basement. You'd come home on the day before Christmas, you couldn't walk into our house, and the snails would be creeping up out of the sink every Christmas morning or Christmas Eve morning. And then all of the family, everybody had like their own little celebrations, but then everybody seemed like came to our house at some point in the evening, because Grandma would usually be at our house on Christmas Eve, especially when we lived in the apartment. It was easy for Grandma and my mother to do Christmas Eve because they were together. Yeah. And after my grandma died, we didn't do so many of the eel and the bacala, but we keep doing the fish. Yeah. And then I did it at my house for every year until my mother died, which was 4 years ago. And we haven't done it since then, and I miss it. And then on Easter, we do the polenta on the big board. I sent you a picture of us doing that. So every Easter, and my father had our grandpa's board, and our grandpa's had an axe handle and a pot, the biggest pot I've ever seen. And for some reason, my dad had the pot in the axe handle, and he would just stir the polenta for an hour over the stove and smash up all the bumps. And then we had Grandpa's board. And I actually Googled this the other day, and maybe you know this, that polenta is a family. It means family, and it means eating together on the board.
Yeah.
Which we thought was kind of crazy, but it's a real thing. So we would all carve out a little portion and eat right off the board. And I married an Irishman, and the first time he came to dinner happened to be Easter Sunday, and he was horrified, absolutely horrified that we're all eating off the same board. And plus, he had never had polenta, so my mother had to make him some spaghetti because he didn't like the taste of it. So, of course, my mother ran over right away and boiled up a pot of pasta for him. So, I don't know. Most of the traditions are food. I do now the 15th of August. Is that an Italian holiday or
yes.
Okay?
It's Ferragosto. Ferragosto.
Yes.
Which is the mid of August. Is supposed to be the hottest day of the year. And it's a national holiday because it also remembers the ascent of the Holy Mary.
Yes. So, well, I mean, I knew it was
heaven.
Catholic, but I wasn't sure it was so Italian. But so we spent a lot of time down on the hill growing up. My aunt used to do all the altar cloths, embroider them and iron them. My sister used to ride on the float when they took the Blessed Virgin out and put her on the float, and the ribbons came down and you pinned all the money on it. And my sister was the one with the little crown and all of that, and she used to pin it on. And I was the little angel with wings leading the procession, and all the Italian ladies crawling on their knees and carrying their banners, and it was awesome. And so I still do that. I still never miss a Mass. It's always in Italian. It's Holy Rosary Church. And when we buried my mom, this was really kind of awesome. She was born on March 3rd, 1916, and we buried her on March 18th, 1916. Excuse me, 2016. And the priest said it was a miracle because she was there when they first built the church. She was one of the first people baptized in the church. And 100 years later, she was buried from the church. And that was really beautiful. It was just like, very beautiful. And it was the priest is Italian. And now when you go there to the feast day, the priest is still Italian. The Mass is in Italian. And every Italian priest in town, I'm sure, is up on the altar. It's like insane, but so I still do that.
Very moving. And by the way, when you do these family reunions, do you, for example, have games or something? Just like, for example, people playing card games or playing Morra, Bocce.
When we lived at our house, when the boys all lived together, my dad was a maniac with his grass, and he had a bocce yard with big spotlights coming down, and every Sunday they would come down and smoke their cigars and play bocce and have little measuring tapes, and they would see, who's got the prolina and who's going to do this, and, so, and I play bocce with my Italian club. The girls play bocce. When we have family reunions, we've really only had one big bunch up, as my grandma used to call it, and when all the Settevendemies get together, but no special games.
Mm-hmm. So you told me about this Italian club.
Yes.
Do you want to speak a little bit about it?
Sure.
How is it,
It started out before my time, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. There's a mother and a daughter. Mother's from Italy, and then her daughter speak fluent Italian. And somehow there were some other Italians, and the other Italians wanted to learn officially how to speak Italian. So Marissa, who is also married to an Irishman, every person in our Italian club is not married to an Italian. There's that one Italian woman in our club married to an Italian. So Marissa Conway was going to be the teacher, and these ladies got together and they paid her, and they had official lessons. Marissa would give them books and lessons, and they were all learning Italian. And one day I saw it on Facebook, and I called one of the ladies and said, I want to get in on that. That looks like so much fun. So I came and joined, and they were still doing one Italian thing each time. And now it has kind of evolved into just getting together once a month. Everybody has Italian food, and we do something Italian. And every month is a color, so you have to come dressed as that color, say that word, make a sentence using that color. Sometimes we bring things that we have from Italy, and you have to come and you make a sentence in Italian, and we print it out so I can read what you're saying. And we're all still trying to learn more Italian words, but it's more about eating and gathering and sharing stories. But there's always some Italian language, whether it's written or spoken, involved every month.
That is very interesting. So you didn't learn Italian from your family then?
No, we weren't allowed.
Yeah.
My grandma lived with me and spoke Italian. She didn't speak English at all. And this is when I was really little. And every time I would answer her in Italian, she would say, "No, speak it English." And she wanted to learn how to speak English, but they definitely did not want us to speak Italian because that was frowned upon. And so it's, how horrible is that?
Yeah.
That I grew up in a bilingual home because my parents and my grandma, that's all they did was speak Italian.
Yeah.
And I can read more Italian than speak.
Yeah.
And so much of Italian is hand language that I can probably know what you're saying if you're talking to me, but no, I do not speak Italian.
It was probably a matter of protection, just like
Yes.
they wanted you to assimilate as soon as possible and not be discriminated in
Right.
any way.
And my father and mother even wanted to be better at speaking English because they didn't speak broken English, but there were so many words that they said, like sandwich, and then that developed to sandwich. And I can remember coming home from school one day and saying, "Mom, that's not the right word," because I had finally seen it spelled out, phonetically said it, and I said, "It's not a sandwich, it's a sandwich." And there were so many words in my house that were like that, and so I think my parents wanted to learn more from us so that they, were a little better.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
So what is, if you are learning, Italian, not from a family, so what is motivation for you to study Italian?
Because I want to go to Italy. But it's just, it's such a beautiful language, and the more that we're together, my little Italian friends, the more we speak it, and it's fond memories. And like Marissa and her mom, to hear them speak Italian, it's wonderful. And I like languages. I like words. I like language. It's just something to do. You have to keep learning. I don't want to stop learning.
That's true.
Yeah.
And what stories have come down to you about your parents and grandparents, if any,
Well, I told you about Grandma's sister getting shot, and I know that my grandma. I told you my grandma had to take in boarders, and my mother was the baby of 5 children. Eventually, my grandma married one of the boarders and left, and my mother was a young child. She was 12, 13 maybe, and so she went to live with her sister. So that grandma that I knew was my mother's sister, not, she was my auntie sis, but she was really like my grandma on that side of town. And My grandpa, I told you that. Grandma's brother. I don't think I'll talk about, I won't talk about the family. We do have a relative that ran off with another woman and moved to Pennsylvania. Yeah, I don't,
Sure, okay.
that's it.
And so you spoke about foodways, especially, food and recipes during celebrations, just like Christmas, etc. Did you typically eat Italian food in everyday life?
Always. And that, when I talked to you and I said how the other two families, even though they were Italian, it was different. Like they probably had macaroni and cheese, or they would have a grilled cheese sandwich made with white bread and American cheese in the middle, and my grilled cheese was a piece of mozzarella on Italian bread under the broiler. That was our Italian sandwiches.
Yeah.
I never had Velveeta in our house, or mayonnaise, or bread other than a loaf of Italian bread. I never. And when I can remember going to middle school, they called it junior high school back then, and buying my lunch occasionally, because otherwise I'd have eggplant sandwiches and everybody else has peanut butter and jelly, and I have eggplant and mozzarella and blah, blah. But mashed potatoes and gravy and chocolate brownies, every time during junior high school, when I could buy my lunch, that was all I bought, mashed potatoes with gravy and brownies, because I never saw those in my house, ever. We did not have meat and potatoes every night. We had pasta, we had so many beans, there were so many meatless dishes at my house. And my mother would make everything with eggs. I guess now we call them frittatas, and eggs with green peppers and onions, eggs with asparagus, eggs with tomatoes, and then everything got smacked in between two pieces of Italian bread.
Yeah.
Yes, we only had Italian food at my house. If Thanksgiving, we would have a turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy, and I was in heaven. Because, I loved my family and I loved my heritage and all that, but I wanted, I don't know, maybe this is horrible, but I used to read like Sally, Dick, and Jane and the Bobbsey twins. And there was a whole country that I lived in that I didn't know anything about. And Annie and Susie used to go to see this grandma that lived in Iowa, and she lived in what I consider my dream house, the epitome of American countryside, whatever. It had turrets and it had a big white porch all around it, and they had mashed potatoes and gravy, and they used to go there every summer. And our parents, we never went ever. My parents always took a vacation together, but we as a family, we went one time to Florida, and I think it was more than my mother could handle, so we never went again. But I wanted that. I wanted more. God bless my parents. They gave me everything, and I had the most wonderful life. But I always wanted more. Always wanted more. And I was the first one out of all the cousins. My sister is older than me, and we had another cousin older than me. And then there's like 8 years between them and me. And this cousin went to college. I don't know if Bobby ever graduated or not. And my sister went a little bit. So then I was the first one that graduated. I was the first one to leave home, which was horrible. My father, if I wanted to go to college, he wanted me to stay and go to Case Western Reserve. Nice girls don't leave home. Nice girls don't do this. Nice girls don't shave their legs. Nice girls don't wear red lipstick. And I couldn't wait to not be a nice girl anymore. I wanted to wear lipstick. I wanted to shave my legs. I didn't want to do anything horrible. And so I just said, if you want me to go to college and I want to be a teacher, and the only way to be a teacher is to go to college, and if you want me to do it, I'm going. So I left. I went to college, and I never came home. After I graduated, I moved out of state. Eventually, though, I did move back to Cleveland, but it was the only way that I could do what I really wanted to do. What I really wanted to do was come to Cleveland and live in my own apartment, which was unheard of. You nice girls don't do that. My father could never say, my daughter lives on the corner of the street, so I had to move to Michigan, be gone for a couple years, and come back to Cleveland to teach and live in my own apartment. But it was a whole roundabout way to get there. And then but really, the minute I graduated from college, I drove 9,000 miles around the United States. The next year I went the other way around the United States. I went to Europe for the whole summer. I mean, I just kept, and I can't remember what the original question was, I'm sorry, but...
Yeah, I mean, that was about foodways, and so my next question is probably, what's your favorite Italian recipe? What's your favorite Italian food ever?
Well, probably spaghetti, and my mom made this zucchini casserole, which I did, and I love making spaghetti with all my cousins because we laugh and we all get on the phone and we text each other now. I love the media and all that. And okay, so one grandma, all the sisters make the same sauce, and grandma told them, you put 2 bay leaves in, and that's how you make the sauce. One day, one of my cousins made sauce, and her father said, who put 3 bay leaves into the spaghetti sauce? So, I mean, we all have the same recipe, and Uncle knew that it wasn't right. So now it's like a joke. Whenever we make spaghetti, we call each other and say, how many bay leaves do you have in the sauce? But it's fun.
Yeah. So do you have memories, just like in the sense of heirlooms or keepsakes or mementos regarding your family?
I do. We all do. When our grandma died, everything got, dispersed. I have a memory from my Aunt Dorothy. She's married my Uncle Mel. She was stationed in Italy during the war, and she brought home some framed pictures of the Hail Mary in Italian and the months in Italian. And when I, was a little girl, she gave me one, and she gave my cousin another one, but my cousin is not Catholic, so a few years ago she gave me the Hail Mary, so I have both of these, and they're from Italy. But I have some things from my grandma. I have my grandma's compote dish, and I have several things from my grandma. I have a bedspread that she crocheted, or it's called tatting. Yeah. She did a tatting bedspread, and I have one from both grandmas, from both sides of the family. So I have a couple things.
Family picture, I suppose?
Oh, I have my grandma's wedding picture, and my grandma and grandpa's wedding picture, which I had copies made and gave to my cousins. And it's a big oval frame and one of those bubble frames, and so I have that. And we have lots of pictures of I have lots of pictures, but that's my favorite.
Great. So you partly cited already. You described the neighborhood, the Cleveland where you grew up, and what was it like? Has it changed over the years? Do you feel that the neighborhood has changed?
Well, yes. Where we ended up our lives in Lyndhurst, it was all Italian. The development that our fathers bought in, they probably bought because I'm assuming they knew the builder. His name was Negrelli, and we all lived on the same street, and everybody on the street was Italian. Almost every single person on the street was Italian. And when we went to high school, half of the city was Jewish and half of the city was Italian, and that was it. And now, because I told you my mother just passed away, and so when I go there now, the street, it's still nice, it's still beautiful, but the population has changed. And I don't, first of all, they're much younger because the homes are nice homes, and I see a lot of young people moving in, and I don't know how many of so much of them are Italian.
So this sense of close-knit community where everyone felt protected, just like a big family environment is no longer there.
I don't see there, and I go there a lot. I go back at least once a month to the street, and I visit with the people that bought my mother's house. I check on all my uncles' houses. My old boyfriend still lives on the street, so I'm there frequently, and I don't see what I used to see, you know, people out on the porches, and no, I don't see that.
I see. And do you know any historical event that have affected your family or your community? Just like I'm thinking about, you know, the Big Depression or World War II or other events that have impacted.
Well, my father, and World War II, my dad was drafted, and he was supposed to go. He was a bus driver, and he also was a mechanic. And after he died, I found these papers, and we had always heard these stories, how my dad was getting on the train to go, and then he was pulled off the train. And I found this letter, which is just, with the word would almost be, it's horrifying to me now when I read this letter. I guess not horrifying, but reprehensible maybe, I don't know. And this letter said, it was written by the train company or the bus company, but they also ran the trains too. And it said how much they needed my father to stay and work. And it said, we have gone so far as to hire women and Negroes to fill these positions. And I was just, to me that was just a horrible statement. We've gone so far as to hire these horrible women and horrible Negroes. I mean, that's how it sounded to me when I read it. And anyway, so because we've tried these methods and it's not helping, he needs to stay. And so he got a deferment and they took him off the train. And I don't know, maybe that's horrible to say in this interview, but it was a fact that happened. And
I mean, it's historical.
It was historical. So my father did not go to World War II. I know the Depression, I was born after the Depression, and my father said they had to borrow $5 to get me out of the hospital. They did not have $5 to bring me home.
Yeah.
And I think because they were in the Depression, all my other uncles, two of my uncles went into the war. My other Uncle Frank had a heart defect, so he didn't serve. They became the most wonderful, hardworking men ever. They were just driven. And my grandpa must have done a very good job of keeping his family together. He worked hard because I don't ever remember us not having any money. We didn't have a lot of stuff, but I don't ever remember not having anything. I always had food, clothing, a house, heat. You know, there were people didn't have coal. And I know my grandpa's, even when I was little, my grandpa was taking care of their family, and so, but the boys went on to do that. None of us ever suffered, none of us. And I think it's just because of their work ethic, you know. They drove old cars, I drove old cars, but I didn't care because I had a car.
Yeah.
You know, I was happy.
Did you experience directly or did you hear of any form of discrimination of Italian Americans?
Well, I know horrible discrimination against our grandparents and our parents. The one thing was, I know that the Ku Klux Klan was burning crosses on their lawns when they lived in Mingo Junction and Wellsville, and they were burning crosses all the time. And I grew up just in such a happy, safe environment, and I never really felt any discrimination until I went to college. I mean, and this is kind of stupid, but I had two boyfriends in my time. One was Jewish. I mean, come on, he's Jewish. You know, so I'm Italian, he's Jewish, but he couldn't go out with me because I was an Italian and Catholic. And his parents put a stop to it. And then after I graduated, I had a man friend. I mean, we were in our mid-20s. And he was a WASP. He was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And his mother wouldn't let him go out with me because I was one of those Italians. And I mean, that was the 2 times ever in my life that I thought I was any different than anybody else. And I thought it was pretty funny coming from a Jewish mother. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, other than that, I don't think so. I was never called, because growing up, actually when I went to college, I went with my 2 best friends and they were Italian. And it seems like a lot of my friends were from New York and New Jersey and they were all Italian. So yeah, no discrimination.
Great. And do you know about stereotypes regarding Italians or Italian Americans?
Stereotypes?
Yes. Just like, for example, all Italians are this way or that way. And what do you think, for example, the mothers of these, boyfriends didn't want they dating an Italian?
Well, what the stereotype was, sure, that they thought we were bad people. I think the mafia, everybody thinks we belong to the mafia, but the mafia was pretty good. I mean, the mafia did but they were just trying to help because there was so much discrimination against Italians. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of them, but then some of them, because Italian mothers are good people, I think, like my mother-in-law was so happy he was marrying an Italian. And he was so lucky. So lucky to get me. But, no, I think my mother was pretty much a stereotypic Italian mother. I told you or across the street, if the kids were bad, they were sent to the corner and they had to read the encyclopedia and learn something. And my mother was swinging a shoe at us or whatever she had in her hand. And then my mother's favorite thing was God was going to punish me. So, my Catholicism and the way I was raised is not at all the way I believe now, because my mother, that's how she was taught too. So, yeah.
So, do you define yourself Italian, Italian-American, American-Italian, American of Italian descent, plainly American?
I think I'm an American of Italian descent.
Okay, yeah.
I definitely am.
Great, because, there's, I would say, a strong importance of the American culture in your upbringing. Right.
There is, and I'm married to a very strong American.
Great. Do you have children or grandchildren, nephews or nieces? If you do, what part of your heritage would you like to pass on to them?
I'm trying. But I only have sons, and it's the mother that does the culture. Yeah. I teach them the food, I bring them, I just went to visit them yesterday with all kinds of Italian food, and whenever I can talk to the kids, my grandchildren, I tell them that. So I always tell my grandchildren, technically, you are 3/4 Italian and 1/4 something else. I don't know what, but you're Italian. But because their name's Kelly, they think they're Irish. And that son is not so much into being Italian, but I think this one might grow up and be a little more Italian because that's my other son, and he's a little more into it and a little more receptive to it. But yeah, because you don't know anything about Cleveland, but the Cuyahoga River divides the city. Mm-hmm. So you might as well think it was the Pacific Ocean between the east and the west side. So we grew up on the east side, all Italians. We moved to the west side, all Irish. So I always say if I lived on the east side, my boys would be Italian, but because I live on the west side, they think they're Irish. And they went to St. Ignatius High School on the west side, which is all Irish, and they could have gone over here to a Catholic all-boys school, and they would have thought they were Italian, but kind of my fault, I guess. They think they're Irish.
So no fights between the Italian and the Irish population.
No, no. We just laugh, you know what.
A lot of intermarriage, though.
Oh, well, when my husband went to get our marriage license, the
Yeah.
clerk, so my mother's name is Nunziata Stella Valenti, my father's name is Carino Anthony Settevendemie, and his mother's name is Marie Wingle, and his father's name was John Patrick Kelly, and the person behind there said, "Oh, I see you guys are entering into a mixed marriage."
Absolutely.
It was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny.
Okay, well, that's it. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
participating. It was
This
really
was
a
fun.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.